Psechas Bava Kama Daf Yud contains two primary sugyas and a mishnah. The first sugya is the sugya of somebody being chav la'acherim. It's a part of a greater sugya of somebody trying to be kaina in a lost object for someone else. Gemara will have a machlokes amiroim on the topic at the end of our lengthy discussion previously, and as to whether our mishnah fits in one side or not. Then we'll get to our mishnah, which introduces the case of someone who's trying to do a kinyan by falling on an object, which will take us to the sugya of one's four amas in which he is currently present. Are those kind of him as his chatzar or not? And general rules of kinyan chatzar. So let's begin. The Gemara says, machlokes amiroim, if somebody picking up a lost object, a found object, in order to be kained for someone else, if that kinyan works. So Gemara says, Rav Nachman or Rav Chisda hold that it is not kained, and the reason is because although it's a benefit of the person is being kained for, it is a problem and is harming everyone else, or at least one other person, and certainly in this case where it's everyone else. Why? Because now it's no longer available for anyone else to be kaina. So the rule is, although you can be zeicha for a person, you can't do it if it's a problem for other people. Now, according to Rashi here, we're referring to where he didn't make him a shliach. He did not appoint him to be a messenger, but if he did appoint him to be a messenger, there's no reason why you can't do something for someone else, even if it is a problem for other people. But here, he's just doing it on his own. He's trying to use zachin la'adam shlei b'fanav, and that only works if it's not chav la'acherim, if it's not harmful to other individuals. Now, says the Gemara, we should have a kasha on this. We should have a kasha on Rava and Rav Nachman's halacha from a brisa that says that a worker who's working and finds an object, what's the halacha of that found object? Does that belong to him, or does that belong to the person who hired him? So the brisa there says it depends what his deal with the Baal Bais was. If he was hired to do a specific job, like hoe or weed, and then this has nothing to do with the job that he was hired, and therefore he's kind of in it, he's acting for himself when he finds the object, he's not acting for the Baal Bais and belongs to him. If, however, he was hired for the day, work for me today, everything you do for me throughout the day is going to be for me, I'm hiring you. So then if he finds an object, he found it for the Baal Bais. So you see that he could be kind of for someone else. He's kind of this object for the Baal Bais. Clearly against what Rav Nachman said. The Gemara says this is different because he's a worker. He's hired, and therefore his hand is like the hand of the Baal Bais. He's not just a regular person being zeicha for someone else. He's actually an employee, and therefore he could do it for him. So the Gemara says his hand is like the hand of the Baal Bais. That can't be, because he could pull out of the deal at any time that he wants. If his hand is literally the hand of the Baal Bais, that would mean that he's stuck to the Baal Bais. He can't just cancel. And the halacha is that you could cancel. A worker is allowed to cancel the arrangement at any time during the day that he wants. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a kasha. He is a worker. His hand is the hand of the Baal Bais. Everything he does is for him. It's considered like the Baal Bais does it himself, but he can cancel anyway. The reason he can cancel is because of a special halacha where the Torah says, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim, avadei heim v'lei avadim la'acherim. Klal Yisrael are my avadim. They're my servants and not anyone else's servants, and therefore you can't put him in servitude. If he wants to pull out, he's allowed to pull out. He has the option. Now, says the Gemara, the other opinion is Rechi bar Abba in the name of Yechanan, who says that somebody picks up a Metzia, a lost object for his friend, it is kaina. But now we have a problem from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says if a person's riding an animal and he tells someone else to be kaina something for him, and that guy says, I want it for myself, then he's allowed to do that. But why? He picked it up, and he picked it up for his friend, so he's kaina in it for the friend. He can't change his mind now. So where says this is not a problem. The case is where he said tenoli. He didn't say, the man riding the animal didn't say, be zeicha in it for me. He's saying, give it to me. So he wasn't saying make a kinyan on it with your hagbah. He was saying, just pass it to me. There's no kinyan that's involved there. Okay, now we begin our next Mishnah. So the Mishnah discusses someone who sees a object on the floor. He sees a object, he finds an object, and he falls on it in order to be kainit. So the Mishnah says if someone else comes and grabs it, the person who grabs it is kainit, because falling on something is not a kinyan for it. There's nothing to do. So it says the Gemara, and we'll begin the Gemara. The Gemara says Rish Lakish says the name of Abba Kohen Vardala. This is the halacha of Arba Amis. Meaning, Rabbanan, we made a rule that the four amas which surround the person, the four amas which he stands in, functions as a chatzar, and he's kind of anything that's in his four amas. And it's a takanas chazal, in order that people shouldn't fight. If everything that's in your four amas belongs to you, people can't grab it, they can't fight. There'll be a simple solution to all arguments as to who owns what. If it's in your four amas, you're kaina it. We'll soon see there are limitations to that, but that is the halacha that Reish Lakish brought from the Tana Abba Kohen Vardala. Says Abaye, Chibar Yosef asked the kasha from Peah, and Rava says Rav Yaakov bar Idi asked kasha from Nezikin. Two kashas, same kasha pretty much, and same set of answers. So the kasha from Peah is as follows. We have a brisa that says if somebody's trying to be kaina Peah in a field, the halacha of Peya, we'll see the same thing applies to Omer and Shukha as well, is that it's hefker for Aniyim. It's hefker for the poor people, and they can make a kinyan on it. So you have a person who wants to be kind of a lot, but he can't grab it all at once. So the Brisa says, what does he do? He picks up some of it, he's kind of that, and then he throws it on other Peya, which is hefker. That is now his possession, what he collected first, and in order to be kind of other things, he's dropping his possession on top of that. He wants to be kind of that. So the Brisa says, that is not a kinyan. He doesn't get anything. If he falls on top of it, or if he spreads his talus on top of it, we take it away from him. Not a kinyan. So throwing your things on it, throwing your talus on it, even falling on top of it, is not a kinyan. Same thing applies to Omer and Shikla, basically. So says the Gemara, so the kasha is, I understand, fine, throwing your talus on something or throwing other things on it is not a kinyan, but if he falls on it, it's in his 4 amas. It should be kind of midin 4 amas. So the Gemara is going to give a few answers. The Gemara first says we're referring to where he didn't say, I want to be kinda with this. He never articulated that falling on it is meant to be a kinyan. Says the Gemara, what's the difference? We said the whole point of this takana is that people shouldn't fight. So if people shouldn't fight, Chazal were mitaking that it should be kinda for him without him articulating it. Otherwise, the same fights will happen. Therefore, why should you have to articulate it over here? So the Gemara says, no. Here you have to, and the reason is because since he did something else, he didn't just stand there, he fell on it. That shows that he's trying to be kinyan by falling on it. He thinks that there's a kinyan falling. Falling is not a kinyan. If he thinks it is, that's what he's trying to be kinyan with. That means that he doesn't have das to be kinyan with 4 amas. That blocks the 4 amas from working for him. Rav gives a different answer. He says that Chazal were only mitaking 4 amas for a person out in separate rishos. If it's in the field which belongs to someone else, in this case it's the field of the person who owns the field that he was mafresh, Peya, they were not mitaking it in someone else's rishos. Now, even though the Torah gave poor people a right to go in there to take things, they only give them a right to take the Peya, they only give them a right to walk there and to take the Peya. But to function as his chutzner, can't function as his chutzner because the Torah never gave that to him. It still belongs to the owner, and you can't turn it into your 4 amas. Okay, that's the discussion of Peya. Now we get to the discussion of Nazikin. It says, Rav Yaakov Bar Idi asked from Nazikin. Somebody sees a Metzia and he falls on it, and somebody else comes and takes it. The one who takes it is Zeichin. This is no less than our Mishnah, which we just saw. Now, Kasha is the same. The case here is that he fell on it. So although he can't be kinded by falling on it, he should be kinded with 4 amas. So the Gemara answers, he didn't say akni, he didn't articulate that he wants to be kinded. The Gemara says again, but the Rabbanon were attacking to avoid fights, and therefore it should work whether he says it or not. So the Gemara says no, but he showed that he's trying to be kinded by falling on it, not by the kinyan of Arba Amas, and therefore the kinyan of Arba Amas does not work. Rav Sheisha says the Rabbanon were only mitaken in a simta where there's not a lot of people, it's not crowded. In Rosh Hashanah, where it's crowded, you can't have a takan of 4 amas because multiple people are occupying the same 4 amas, and therefore this happened in a Rosh Hashanah, and there the kinyan of Arba Amas does not work. But the original halacha of Arba Koyin Vardala was b'chol makim. It says a person's 4 amas is kind of for him everywhere. That sounds like even Rosh Hashanah. It says no. That phrase is just to add the sides of Rosh Hashanah, like the sidewalk on the side of the public street where people don't walk a lot, but they don't. There's not a lot of people, but there aren't few people, kind of in between. That's what he's being marbe. Okay, now the Gemara brings more halachas that Rish Lakish quotes from Abba Kain Vardala, also in the halachas of kinyan chatzar. So Rish Lakish says, in the name of Abba Kain Vardala, a ketana, a girl who's a child, does not have a din of chatzar, and of course, therefore, she doesn't have a din of Arba Ames, because Arba Ames functions as a type of chatzar. The Gemara says Rav Yochanan quotes Rav Yanai, who says that she does have a din of chatzar and she does have a din of Arba Ames. They have a machlokes. A ketana, does she have a din of chatzar and a din of Arba Ames or not? So the Gemara, what is this machlokes about? So the machlokes is, what is the source of the din chatzar? Is it as her hand, function as an extension of her hand? Well, if so, just like a katana has a hand to be able to be makabel things, because a katana who's married to Dairaisa can be makabel a get midaraisa, so she has a yad. Therefore, she has a din of chatzar as well, and she should also have a din of Arba Amas. Those are all extensions, all function as her yad. If, however, it functions as a shliach, as a messenger of hers, a katana does not have shlichus, a katan doesn't have shlichus either, and therefore, just like she doesn't have shlichus, she cannot have a din of chatzar or din of Arba Amos either. Now, the Gemara asks, is there a possibility of learning that chatzar function as a shliach? I'll show you that it cannot be a shliach. Why? Because we have a brisa. The brisa says that you can be koine geneva. You can steal something with your chatzar. So the brisa says, when the Torah says biyadai, if you find stolen objects in someone's hand, he steals with his hand. That teaches me that you can steal with your hand. How do you know that you can steal with your roof, your yard, or your karfif, which is another form of yard, an open area? Because it says himatze timatze, that adds other types of places. So if an animal, let's say one is in there and you lock it up in your yard, you just stole it with your chatzar. Now, says the Gemara, if a chatzar is a person's shliach, so a shliach can't steal. The halacha is if everyone says to Shimon, steal something from me, it's not, and Shimon goes ahead and steals it. It doesn't go to Reuven; it goes to Shimon, and Shimon's the one who's over the avera, because we have halacha ein shliach dvar avera. Somebody sends you to do an avera, you can't do the avera, and you can't blame him if you do. It's your own decision of your own free will. You should have listened to Hashem, not to this individual. So, if a chatzar has medin shliach, how could a chatzar be kaina for the mishalech? We have a rule, ein shliach l'dvar avera, and this sounds like a shliach l'dvar avera. So the Gemara gives a few answers. The Gemara first says, Ravina says, when do we say ein shliach l'dvar avera? That's if the shliach himself will be chayiv. That is, if the shliach will violate the iser. Here, the chatzar is not mitzvah in anything, it's an inanimate object, and therefore it can't be chayiv. And therefore, it is not mechayiv, and therefore it's the mishalech that's chayiv. It's the mishalech that is the thief here. So if that's true, what are you going to say to somebody who instructs an isha or an eved, a woman or a eved, to go and steal something? They're also not obligated to pay for what they steal. So halacha we saw in the end of Maseches Bava Kama, you cannot claim from them to return an object. You certainly can't pay kefil or chaimish. So therefore, they're not a bar chiyuva, and they should also not have a problem of ein shliach l'dvar avera, and therefore their shlichus to steal should be chal for the mishalech. Someone says no. And Isha and Eved are over an isser by stealing. They still have divya rav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu still told them not to steal. They can't pay back because they don't have property. As a matter of fact, the Mishnah, which we saw in the end of Bava Metzia itself, says that if the woman gets divorced or the Eved gets freed, and now they have property of their own, now they are obligated to pay. So the isser is definitely there. The obligation is there. They just practically don't have what to pay with. Now, the second answer is Rav Samo. He says, when do we say ein shliach l'dvar avera? Where the shliach has a choice, and therefore it's his own bechira, and he can't blame the mishaleach that he chose to do a sin. However, this is talking about a chatzar. Chatzar, of course, has no free will, and therefore it could function as a shliach l'dvar avera. Says Gemara, what is the difference between these two explanations? To that, the Gemara answers that nafkamin is someone who is a person who has free will, but he's not a bar chiyuva. So what's an example of that? A kohen makes a shliach to be mekadesh, a divorcee for him. That person is a Yisrael. He's not in the Yisr, therefore he's not a bar chiyuva. However, he is a bar bechira. And the other example is a man who tells a woman to go cut off the payas of a child. She is not a bar chiyuva. She's not in the mitzvah of leisakif. However, she does have free will. So the explanation in the answer that the only time you don't say ein shliach l'dvar avera is where the shliach has no free will. So here they do have free will. According to the explanation that you say at any time that they're not a bar chiyuva, here the woman and the Yisrael are not a bar chiyuva in this iser. Okay, I'm going to ask further, is it possible to say that a chatzar is not learned out from the din of yad? It can't be. We know that it's yad. We have a brisa discussing giving a get to a woman, and there's a limud that the Torah says put it in yada, so that only teaches us that she can be makabel with her hand. How do we know she could be makabel with her roof, her chatzar, or her karfeif? So therefore it says v'nosan. V'nosan implies all kinds of other things, and therefore that includes everything. Now, this has to be midin yad, not midin shliach, because we have a different drasha that these areas can serve as her shliach, which is learned in Masachas Kedushin. So the Gemara therefore says a few answers here. The Gemara says, as far as being makabel the get, there's no machlekes. Everyone agrees that a chatzar functions as a yad. The only machlekes is when you have a found object. What's the machlekes? Someone wants to say three explanations. One explanation is, or three different versions. One explanation is you learn Metzia from the get. So one opinion holds that you learn Metzia from the get, and therefore it's midin yad. The other one says you don't learn Metzia from the get, and therefore it's midin shliach. Another explanation is by a ketana. Everyone agrees that you learn Metzia from the get. Here we're talking about a katan. That is, we're asking about a boy who's a katan. We're not asking about a girl ketana. Girl ketana, you're right, you could learn from get to Metzia. However, we're asking about a katan. You have the same halacha. Do you learn that from a ketana? A ketana, we know she has a yad. does a katan ever have a yad? Because we don't see by a get that he has a yad at all. Now, the Gemara's third shot is to say, actually, there's no machlekes. One is talking about a katan, and the other is talking about a katana. And there is by a kitana, but there is not by a katan. Or, alternatively, one is talking about metzia, one is talking about a get. And everyone agrees that you have by metzia, and that you have by a get, you don't have by metzia. And there's no machlekes at all.